Well, hello everyone, and good evening if you are in Hong Kong or in Asia, or at least in this part of the world. And well, good morning, good afternoon if you are attending from elsewhere in the world. Welcome to this live 1-hour webinar on advanced transformational coaching. And we're super happy to have you with us tonight. This is the fourth of a series of 12 live and free coaching webinars that we're offering you here at Transcend International. And the aim of these webinars is to share our expertise and insights of various foundational and advanced coaching topics to anyone interested in coaching. So whether you are a new or experienced, or maybe a soon-to-be coach, or maybe you're an HR professional or a team leader, or even a parent, we can all benefit from gaining coaching tools and experience to apply in our everyday lives. A quick word about me. My name is Lisa Rosen, and I work as Head of Public Programs Development at Transcend International. And I'm also a certified professional coach from Transcend. And I will be introducing you this webinar, which will then be delivered by our speaker and CEO of Transcend International, Tony Dickel, and who you will have the pleasure of meeting in just a few moments. Two things I wanted to mention before we start is that do stay with us until the end of the webinar, because we will give you an opportunity to sign up to our programs with a special webinar discount, especially created for this event. And you will also receive more information if you wish to engage with us for your organizations. And finally, just a few words on some housekeeping rules. We do encourage interactions throughout the webinar, and well, for those already present before, you have noticed that this is already the case. So there will be some polls for you to provide your feedback, so please do participate in this. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please enter them in the Q&A box, which you can find at the bottom of your screens, and we'll make sure to answer that throughout the webinar. Okay. So first of all, a quick note on Transcend International, just to make sure that we're all aligned on who we are and what we do. So we are a leading global organization and provider of coaching, training, and services based here in Hong Kong. Our mission is to help individuals and organizations adapt and organize in the face of increasing pressure, stress, and overwhelm. This, as you can see on your screens, is actually our mission statement, which we wrote a few years ago, and which is still pretty true, or it may be even truer than ever in the world we are facing and experiencing today. Right, Tony, I will ask you to change. Yes, we can go to the next slide, because I would like to introduce you. Yeah, we can still go to the next one. Yeah, I want to introduce you to Tony Dickel, who is, there he is, who is going to be our speaker tonight, and who you will be seeing in just a few seconds. So Tony Dickel is our CEO of Transcend International, and he's also the country director of Potential Project of Hong Kong and China, which is a leading global provider of corporate-based mindfulness trainings. Now, Tony is a leading executive coach. He's an experienced leadership coach, a corporate mindfulness trainer, and a trained psychotherapist. He brings more than 20 years of experience in various leadership positions in sectors such as investment banking and management consulting. And last but not least, to help you out on all those abbreviations that you can see on your slide, Tony has also served as past president of various coaching organizations like the Hong Kong International Coaching Community, the International Coach Federation, and the European Mentor and Coaching Council. So now I'm going to leave the floor to Tony, and I hope you enjoy this webinar on transformational coaching, and I'll see you back at the end.
Okay, let me see. I think I may be on mute. No, I'm not on mute. So good evening and welcome. It may be actually good morning or good afternoon for some of you. I noticed that we have people from around the world, including the UK, India, Africa. I'm not sure there's anybody here from the US this time. If there is, then please put a note into the chat box so that we can see you. Not guilty as charged on being president of the EMCC or director of the EMCC. Transcend is a founding member of the EMCC in Asia Pacific, but I can't claim that one. Great to be here to talk about this topic of transformative coaching. And hopefully you'll get something useful from the brief time that we have together. It's a big topic, and we have to be very, very, we could talk about this topic actually for weeks, probably on end, and we try to find a way of distilling what might be useful in maybe 45 minutes. Not easy. So I'd like to start with a poll. And, oh, hold on. Okay, here we go. I'd like to start with a poll, which I'm going to launch in a second. And the poll really is about really what you do. What is it that, well, it's actually not what you do, is what is it that most describes you in the context of perhaps why you are here? So I'm launching the poll right now. What is it that, how would you best describe yourself in the context of your interest in this program? And I don't know if you can see the poll. And I'm asking that because I see that there are no results coming in, which is a bit of a giveaway. So let me close it and try to relaunch it and see if you can see it. Anybody can see the poll? And if you can't, I'm just going to read out, and maybe you can just put something in the chat window about what is your interest in this program. Are you a trainer or a consultant interested in becoming a coach? Are you already a coach that has some training? Are you just curious about coaching? Or are you already an experienced coach looking for advanced training? So we do have things coming in, and I'm hoping the other polls work. They may not. Sometimes there are some challenges these days with Zoom. All right, so we've got a few coaches. Yep. I've just been instructed by my admin team to try poll 1, which I did, but it's not working. So we'll let that go for the moment. All right, so we've got learning professionals, we've got people that are curious about coaching. We've got a couple of advanced coaches. We even have a coach trainer here, and a number of learning professionals and coaches who would like to use one of their language, sharpen the saw, which is lovely. So we have quite a mixture of different types of people on this call, which is lovely. So why should we be interested in transformational coaching? And this is really perhaps related to the question, why do we do what we do? And in particular, why is it that we sometimes don't do the things that we should do in order that we can be who we would love to be? Turning my video off, by the way, because otherwise I'll tend to move around and go off screen. It will be distracting for people. So why is it that we do what we do or not do what we perhaps should do? And I'm going to start out with a bold statement here. That for most of us, we do have things that are actually important to us. There are things that we really care about and meaningful to us. We can sometimes, and we sometimes do describe these as values. And from these either consciously or unconsciously held values come for many of us, these things which we might call outcomes. So from the things that we care about, there may be outcomes that might fit into those things that we might be looking, if you wish, to achieve. And sometimes these might be things that we would like to happen, or things that we would like to have in our lives, or sometimes it might be accomplishments or achievements, or they may be perhaps even more aspirational. For example, the kind of work that I wish to do or the kind of person that I would like to be. So those are sort of outcomes that many of us are holding. And from outcomes, for many of us, come goals. Now, the thing about outcomes is that they may or may not point towards the things that we may have to do in order that those outcomes may be achieved. And when we're thinking about goals, we are in the territory of what it is that we might need to do differently in order that outcomes might be achieved, especially when we're talking about coaching, and particularly especially when we're talking about transformational coaching. So we sometimes call these types of goals development goals, or perhaps improvement goals, which hopefully, if we're on track, lead to actions which serve the goals. And we would certainly hope that the actions that we're taking moment by moment are serving goals that are in line with outcomes that we care about. If we're on track, that hopefully is what's going to be happening. And then when we take those actions, of course, we would have results of those actions, which we hope are in line with our goals. And those results might feed back into the outcomes. You know, the results, in other words, may or may not be in line with the outcomes that we're looking for. So working back, and so you could say that these are the rails, if you wish, or the tracks of life. This is what we're doing. This is what we're up to moment by moment, whether we know it or not. Now, working backwards, we know that we are always doing something, right? In every moment, there's always something happening. So the challenge for us is, are we consciously aware of what goal or what outcome the various actions that we're taking in moments are serving? And if we are we aware that those actions are in line with the things that we really care about? Okay, so this is a very, very important thing. Okay, so now what I would like to do is just launch a poll, and I'm going to try and launch another poll, and if it doesn't work, then I apologize. But let's go for it anyway. Here we go. So what I'd like to do is, given this little slide, I'd like you to estimate the percentage of time you think the things that you're up to, the things that you're doing in a particular moment are, let's say, actually in line with the things that you're trying to achieve or the things that you really care about. So let's see if this works. Anybody see the poll?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be working, Tony.
All right, so we're going to have to give up on all polls. And I'll give you a little bit of insight into this, because it turns out that research indicates that so certainly more than 50% of the time in terms of research that was published in 2009, and possibly up to 80% of the time in terms of research that is possibly about to be published, the stuff that we're up to in a particular moment is not actually in line with our goals. We are maybe doing things, we may be attending to the last thing that came into our awareness, or we might be consciously attending to something that is off track relative to the things that we care most about. And that's worth knowing. So what is it that coaching can do to help in this domain? So in very, very simple terms, a coach helps a client to do that which they need to do so that they can be who they would love to be. So that's not really a definition of coaching, but that's really what we're doing if we come down to first principles. We're helping people to do what they need to do so that they can be who they need to be, who they would love to be. And there'll be an interesting little twist on that just a little bit later on. So just expanding on that a little bit, let's have a look at our coaching definition and see how this relates to what we said so far. So here, what you see right here is the ICF definition, which is interesting, but it doesn't really say much. And what the ICF says is that a coach partners with a client in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires and helps them to maximize their potential. That's the ICF definition. So what we do is we've expanded that quite materially into these domains, these two sort of broad basic domains. The way that we do that is firstly, to help a client. It actually should say firstly, to help a client to be clear on their goals, to have clarity on that which they want. And then once they have that clarity, then we help them to keep their attention focused on what is necessary in order to make optimal moment by moment choices of behavior, which lead towards those goals. Okay, so that all sounds very, very simple. But in fact, it is simple, but it's not easy. Okay, so that's the definition that we have, and it's coming up again. So let me here we go. So of course there are many different types of coaching that you may have heard about, and they range from skills coaching through performance coaching, through developmental coaching, through transformational coaching. And just in a nutshell, as we go, if you wish, to the right of the spectrum, we're moving out of coaching for skill sets, and we're moving towards coaching for mindsets. And skills coaching is nearly always directly job related. It might be, for example, teaching somebody how to give and receive feedback, to conduct performance reviews, and skills coaching tends to focus around accountabilities, holding accountability for the learning and practice of new skills, or learning new skills and practicing new skills. So it's very much at the sort of what we call the entry level of coaching. The next level up, you could say, is performance coaching, which is less focused directly on skills acquisition and more focused on raising outputs and performance in terms of outputs and outcomes. And
Tony,
yes?
Yeah, Tony, this is Lisa. I'm just seeing comments that people are saying that the slides are not moving, that it seems to be stuck on the slide where you're showing values, outcomes, goals, and actions. And yeah, people are not seeing the rest of the slides.
Okay, I don't know what's happening there.
Yeah, we're stuck on slide number 15.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, we won't need the slides, of course, but it's nice if we've got them. So can anybody share what they have right now?
Yeah, people are saying
they see right now.
Slide 15. Yeah.
Okay, I have stopped sharing my slides.
Yeah.
For the moment. Okay, and I'm going to restart showing them. And if you can't see the slides, then we will go without slides. No problem. Let's share screen again.
Yes, it looks better. So participants, can everyone confirm that you're seeing a different slide now? Yes.
By the way, Lisa, were you stuck too?
Yes, totally.
Okay,
yes.
so maybe it would be lovely if you could just interrupt me and let me know if
you're
still stuck as I advance through the slides.
Yes.
All right, so I think I got up to just talking about developmental coaching, which is about the development of underlying competencies, and it is such things as, building, competency in time management, or, coming up with things that might be necessary to improve performance. And on the developmental side, which is, if you wish, I'm going to say the next level up in coaching, this deals with the development of underlying competencies and capability. And it tends to be more related to what we call the whole person, as opposed to just a particular problem. Okay, so it might be things like developing more EQ, more emotional intelligence in certain contexts, or perhaps being a better presenter in certain contexts. And what developmental coaching is really doing is it's helping a person see what assumptions that people might be making about the world that might interfere with their growth in certain contexts, including things like, I must never look stupid, otherwise ... or I must always be right, otherwise ... will happen. So developmental coaching is looking at things like that. And finally, transformative coaching or transformational coaching. And what we say about this is that generally behavioral change requires development. Development often requires transformation. So what do we mean by transformation? This is the assumption that we will change in ways that are necessary when we develop acute and deep levels of self-awareness. Self-awareness around what are our motivations, where is our attention in particular moments, what storylines might be running in our mind that might be getting in the way or might be enabling our development. And we say that this is about the development of exceptional mental and emotional balance. So transformational coaching implies the development of exceptional mental and emotional balance. And so it works. What transformational coaching is really doing is it's working with the various ways that we construct ourselves, our experience, what it feels like to be me in a particular moment. So it deals with the emotions and impulses that we may be creating relative to stuff that comes to us that might either A, support, or B, get in the way of who we need to be and what we need to do. So it deals with what we really care about at our core. It is and deals with it really. You could say it's at the level of the way of being. Okay, so there you go. Now, are we still stuck? Because I'm moving along. I haven't gone to the next slide yet, but I've just moved the animation along.
It looks good. It looks good now.
Okay, so as we move in towards the domain of transformative coaching, we get to really challenging, deeply held assumptions, which may be very, very true to us, but nonetheless, they may be fake news. Stuff that is coming up in the mind that might be limiting us from moving forward in our lives. And this is the whole process of what we call meaning making or sense making. So turning this kind of little glib thing that I said earlier on at the end on its head, I said earlier on that a coach helps a client to do what they need to do so that they can be who they need to be. A transformational coach is helping a client to be who they need to be so that they can do what they need to do. So it kind of, in a way, it's slightly turning it on its head. Okay. So again, if there's any questions coming in, please do feel free to ask them. I will be stopping in about at about say 8:15 Hong Kong time. I will stop and I'll let Lisa come in and say a few things, and then we'll have some Q&A, and maybe I'll do a little bit more content after that. But there is so much material that we could talk about that I've had to make very, very dramatic content choices in order to get something meaningful done today. Okay. All right. So what's the starting point really of transformational coaching is to understand this intrinsic relationship between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Okay. And that knowing that actions arise from a combination of thoughts and feelings that normally come first. In fact, they always come first before the action. We might call them impulses. And you may or may not know that before any action, there is always either a subconscious or a conscious intention. And that those intentions would often have an emotional component. And very often, we are not aware of these intentions. We just do. So for many of us, for example, so here I am, you can probably see me right now, and let's say that I've got my phone in front of me. And for many of us, we may be right in the middle of a conversation with somebody, but if the phone starts to flash, we've lost the conversation and we're on the phone and we've kind of forgotten that there's somebody there listening to us. So this is what I mean by not necessarily being aware of the intentions that we're creating before actions. We're just kind of often stuck on the autopilot. And if that's the case, then we don't know that the actions that we're taking in a particular moment are actually in line with that which we most care about. And the results, therefore, might be either A, unpredictable, or B, undesired, often one or the other. Okay. So, so if a person is stuck in trying to change a particular behavior, it's often because they're not attending to the ways that they might need to change their thought patterns, i.e. what we call cognitive schema, the ways that they create automatic thoughts about the stuff that's happening around them, or the ways that they're automatically creating feelings, or otherwise known as emotions, related to the situations around them. Okay, and I'll just come on to a question that's just popped up in the Q&A window from Natasha. How essential is high EQ for transformational mindset coaching? What are the suggested ways for somebody with a low EQ to become a transformational coach? I've got a very, very quick answer to that question. And the answer is EQ is almost certainly essential for an individual to be an effective transformational coach. And there's various reasons for that, which I hope will become evident. So in terms of what are the ways that a person with a low EQ can become a transformational coach, it's not a problem. EQ is a set of skills that we can learn in the same way as we can learn any other skill. And we now know how to train emotional intelligence. And believe it or not, we say we now know, because say no more than say 25 years ago, we didn't really feel that these things were possible to change. And now we know through the science of neuroplasticity that anything is changeable, including emotional intelligence. So I don't know if that answers the question, Natasha. It's all up for grabs now. We can change anything that we would like to, as long as we have the will. We can then learn the skill to change. Okay. All right. So, so how do we help people do what they need, be who they need to be, really, so that they can do what they want to do? So there are many different approaches that we use in order to help people to do this. And the thing to know about coaching, any kind of coaching, is there is no one size fits all in coaching. Okay, you must realize this. So we do train many different types of models coming from various different, if you wish, psychological traditions, in collectively, most of them will work to help a client to really develop the things that are necessary in order to be able to move forward with their lives and their work. But there won't be one particular tool or model that works for everybody. What will work for everybody, though, is you. Your ability to show up with the way of being as a transformational coach, which is a person who is present and attentive to what's happening with the client, and capable of really holding open the space so that the client can do the work, which really is the basis of all coaching. All right. So what I'd like to do, though, is share a foundational model for transformative work, which we call the 4 balances model. And this work is in turn grounded in the work of doctors Sean Shapiro and Alan Wallace, who are really thought leaders in this whole idea of deep transformational change. And in a very small nutshell, the model it looks like this, that in order to help people to stay on track, what we're doing is we're helping them to bring on these 4 emotional and mental balances. And the first one is what we call attentional balance. So what is attentional balance? In a nutshell, it is training calming of the mind so that the mind becomes what we call serviceable. So what is a serviceable mind? It's a mind that can be directed to whatever the owner of that mind wants to direct it to. Okay, so that we can focus on whatever we choose for as long as we would like to. Sometimes we call this rule number 1, focus on what you choose. Okay, so that's attentional balance. So the next one is what we call motivational balance. We used to call this cognitive balance, but cognitive is a bit of a difficult word, which does actually mean deeper underlying motivations. But we can equally call this motivational balance. So what is motivational balance? Is knowing, it's discovering and acting in service of what we really care about, and making skillful choices about the things that we really care about. So you could say it's choosing the right thing to focus on, which is sometimes called rule number 2, focusing on the right thing. Okay, so the third balance is dealing with the stuff that might prevent us from focusing on the right thing, which is seeing things other than as they actually are. So and that is the domain of what we call cognitive balance. So in a nutshell, cognitive balance is your ability to see things as they are, which includes knowing all of the various storylines that might take you off track, and then how to deal with it when it happens. Okay, so there's really the idea of cognitive balance, which is understanding the storylines, which are always fake news, that are taking us away from what we really care about. They have to be fake news because they're not what we really care about. Okay, so there's that. And by the way, when I say fake in this context, it means false appearances to the mind, keeping us entrapped or entangled in our patterns and habits and stories. Okay, so the final one of these 4 balances is emotional balance. So emotional balance is the idea that if we're going off track, it is both because we may have missed that we're having an emotional reaction, and also it will create an emotional reaction that we are capable of noticing as a signal to bring ourselves on track. But we need to develop the competence of emotional balance, which is related to emotional intelligence, but not exactly the same. So emotional balance is about, excuse me, it's about feeling as opposed to being emotions. We can either feel them or we can be them. You know, how often have you said to yourself, I am angry, or I am frustrated? Well, that's actually not really the case. What you're having is a physiological experience, which is creating a lot of psychological cognitions that you are experiencing as an emotion of frustration. Okay, so we need to be able to unpick this and to be able to experience them fully, feeling them fully, so that we can bring awareness and space around it, so that we can then move forward skillfully. Okay, so there's that. So what is it that makes it hard in order to bring these four balances? You know, what is it that makes it hard for clients to be imbued with these four balances? Okay, so our friends at Potential Project actually talk about this thing called the paid reality. And I really love this little metaphor, and we're using it with permission. The reality is that the way the world is today is not conducive to emotional and mental balance. It's not conducive to keeping us on track, or to us being able to remain on track. We're living in what's known as the paid reality, which has got nothing to do with being paid in the traditional sense. In fact, we strongly recommend that we are not paid in the context of this particular definition. And this definition is that where P stands for pressure. So you will notice, I think just about everybody is under more pressure today than maybe they were 5 years ago. And we're not necessarily only talking about coronavirus and other things like this, although of course that is a factor. The fact is that as Lisa mentioned earlier on, this profundity of systemic change, demographic change, social change, technology change, governance change, consumer behavior change, all of these things all happening at the same time is creating a tremendous pressure. And at the same time, many of us feel compelled to be always on, not able to take a rest, feeling anxious if we don't have something to do. How often do we find that either us or our clients, you know, they'll go home and maybe they're with their family, but their mind drifts into their iPhones, wondering what emails that are there coming in. So at the same time, we are bombarded with information, and of course that sets up what we call distress or distraction, and it's this distraction that wants to take us off track. So I wanted to do another poll here, and I'm going to try this and see what happens. I'd like you to enter into the Q&A window, not the Q&A window, into the chat window. If you don't mind, why don't you just put in the percentage of time you think, on average, people are distracted from that which is important to them. What percentage of the time, from 0% to 100%, do you think that the average mind has been distracted from what might be optimal? What might be the most important thing for that mind to be attending to? What do you think? Yeah, so we got a lot. Wow. So we got a lot of people that are answering levels of 50%, 60%, 70%, etc., etc. So yeah, I mean, this is true. This is true. So you're getting this right. The research that was published in 2009 talks about it being around about 50%, but that was before we had these things, weapons of mass distraction, otherwise known as iPhones, Android phones, or things like this, plus social media, Facebook, and all of these other things, which are just hijacking our attention. We have them in our lives. And these weapons of mass distraction are bombarding our attention, holding it under siege. And biologically, actually, we find it threatening. Subconsciously, this creates a continuous change and the default mind assesses this as a threat. Okay, so we no longer have a moment to just check in with ourselves. I'm always feeling that we need to be doing something. And what has come as a result of this is the idea that we're living in a world now of instant gratification. and this is a perceived but running in the subconscious need that is preventing us from actually being at our best in service of the things that we really care about. So you could say that given our evolutionary legacy, we're not necessarily fit for purpose. And therefore, we need to train. We need to learn, how to remain on track. Many of us are not good at it. And the conditions of the modern world make it very difficult for us to be good at it. Okay, so there's that. Now, got a couple of questions. So the role of self-care in coaching. The role of self-care in coaching is very similar to the role of self-care in therapy, and it is extremely important. We always say that if you would like to be a great coach, especially a good transformational coach, then you need to look after yourself before you can help others. The oxygen mask analogy really works here. Seeing things as they are, some tips on seeing things as they are. I'll get to that a little bit later on, I hope. So let's see. Let's start though with attentional balance, which is the business of paying attention on demand to that which is most useful to us. And know that attentional balance is probably I'm actually going to say it's probably the most important one of these four balances. And the reason why I say that is because without attentional balance, none of the others actually work. You're going to get, without attentional balance, which is the ability to pay attention on demand to what you would like to pay attention to. Most people without attentional balance are just going to get caught up with stories, go off into distractions, and all of their goals are going to remain unfulfilled. All right, so that's what happens with the lack of attentional balance. And so coaching, much of coaching is about facilitating a process whereby the client is able to manage their attention. Okay, so why do we do this? And I probably just want to talk about this gentleman called William James, who he's known as the sort of founder or father of modern Western psychology. He was around about 150 years ago, and he was a man that was well ahead of his time. And what he said about attention was that the ability to bring back a wandering attention again and again and again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. So he got that one right. Modern science very much supports this now. He also said, though, that an education which could improve this ability would be an education or the education par excellence. And what he really means there is that if you could do it, if you could be trained to do it, then that would be the best education that you could possibly get. And in those days, people didn't know how to do that. It was thought that the faculty of being able to manage attention was something that you were born with and you couldn't develop it over time. We now know through the process of excellent transformational coaching that is absolutely not true. So he said it is easier to define this as an ideal than to give any directions for making it happen. So science now provides support, as I mentioned, for 1 and 2, but science has also shown that 3 is not true. Thank God, because it fundamentally means now that we can learn how to manage our attention, it means that we can change whatever it is that we would like to change about ourselves in service of the things that we care most about. Okay, we don't have to give up on those things. All right, so what does attentional balance actually mean? So what it means is that attention can be placed on and sustained at will on that which is useful to us for our success and for our well-being. So it's about making wise choices of focus, all right? So what do we mean by the right thing in this context? So what we mean is on stuff that's useful to us, which includes our goals. It includes the tasks, the actions, the behaviors that are necessary so that we might move towards goals and the things that we care about, which often, they just go missing from the mind in what we call the moment of choice. we find that our attention is not on tasks, actions, and behaviors. It's just been hijacked somewhere else. Skills that we might need to bring. We need to be attentive to those skills. We need to remember that we have skills when we might be forgetting that we have skills to do certain things in certain contexts. We might need to remember that we have strengths and other mental resources that can help us to do the right thing at the right time. Such things as patience, curiosity, acceptance, the ability to let go. All of these are mental resources that we have that sometimes go missing in action when we're stressed. What values would we like to bring into a particular situation? So as you're going to find out in a few moments, understanding our values, what we really care about, is profound, as long as we can keep our attention there and stop it from being hijacked. And then what other resources, external resources, but may we have around us that might be able to support us as we do the things that we need to do to be the things that we need to be. So in a nutshell, as Rasmus Højgaard wrote in his book, 1 Second Ahead, attentional balance allows us to take stuff that's coming into our senses, i.e. input, and instead of going off on the autopilot in terms of reactivity to that input, old reactive patterns of thinking, feeling, and then doing relative to what's coming to us. Attentional balance allows us to have a moment of choice. And in that moment of choice, we can change our direction. We can have clarity of mind. We can calm the mind. We can redirect our attention to what we choose so that we can be effective, goal-oriented, and resilient. So that's really what the attentional balance piece is doing for us. I wanted to tell a story actually just here about an analogy about, I've got a very, very good friend who is a rock climber. And he is a person who puts himself in genuinely life-threatening situations again and again and again. Okay, if he gets his next move wrong even by an inch, then of course he's dead when he's dangling 1,000 foot above the Yosemite Valley. So where is his attention? If the thing that he cares most about, if his attention has gone off to the fear of falling off the rock and the consequence of what might happen if he falls off, and that's where his attention is, then he's going to lose focus on what needs to happen right here, right now, in this moment, where he needs to put his hands, his fingers, his feet. He needs to be able to see things as they are and use the strengths and the various resources that he has in the present moment in order to achieve the outcome that he would like to have of making it to the top of the rock, or at least not falling off the rock. So there's that. So what about motivational balance? So we've dealt with attentional balance, but you know, what we say about attentional balance here, by the way, is, just to sum it up before we get on to motivational balance, is that whatever strengths you have, whatever tasks you need to do, whatever resources you have, whatever values you have, whatever skills you have, whatever aspirations you might have, none of that matters unless you have the ability to first notice that your attention has gone somewhere else other than those things, on your distractions, on your anxieties, on your sense of limitation or negative storylines, and then be able to redirect your attention back to those resources, okay? So this is really in a nutshell about being mindful, or about being acutely self-aware, all right? So the second one is motivational balance. And we're probably not going to get to cognitive before we pause, but I do want to just quickly whack through motivational balance because it is also foundational. So motivational balance is the discovery of what's really important to a person. And motivational balance provides a window into what I said earlier on in intentional balance, which is what is the right thing that I should be focusing on? It's a window into that. And why is it that I've put a really important in brackets here? And the reason why there's the really in there is because the mind is actually good at making automatic predictions, which lead us to believe in a particular moment that something needs our attention more than what we know is actually more important to us in the long term. The mind is very, very good at making up these stories of what we need to be doing now, which prevent us from moving towards what's really important in the longer term. All right. So goals, short, medium, and long term, knowing them and acting in service of them is what we call motivational balance. The second one is values. How do you want to show up in your life, particularly when you're stressed? So such things as, I'd like to live courageously, I would like to live compassionately, I would like to be a kind parent who is a supportive role model for my kids, or I would like to be a leader who is at my best moment by moment, despite anxiety and stress and frustration, so that I can behave in a way that moment by moment brings others to be at their best. So things like this. And once, and once our values and goals are really known to us, they are then a potential anchor for our attention. Just as if any of you have ever practiced mindfulness, the breath can be an anchor for our focus in the practice of mindfulness. We can then, under stress or distraction, have values and goals as the object of our attention. And in that way, they become both the compass and the keel for us as we move through what is actually a very difficult and challenging world. So the compass obviously is the direction. It helps us to keep an eye on the prize, on the direction that we would like to move in. And the rails, or the keel, is that which, if you wish, prevents us from going off track. And so the keel on a boat is that sort of sharp thing that goes very, very deep into the water that keeps it upright in winds and stops it from being knocked off course. So know this, though, because this is obviously, as you can imagine, motivational balance is a big domain, and not all goals or even all values are created equally. And what we need to be able to do is to help a client to create goals which are capable of, if they are remembered in the moment of choice, they're capable of inspiring movement in the moment of choice in what we call a valued direction. Okay, so it's our job to help a client to make sure that their goals are capable of inspiring movement in what we call key moments of choice. Okay, so in other words, we say that we're helping a client to create a goal that is well formed, that it is specific enough that a person can actually remember it easily without doing too much cogitation in the middle of this busy world that we're in. But it sits inside a context, which means with whom, where do they want it to apply, when, what time do they want to be able to do this? We often forget that we don't have to have everything done tomorrow. And that when we get caught up in the fact that things are not as we like them to be right now, when what we need to be able to do instead is to really focus on our values and focus on what is it, okay, so the things around me that I don't like right now, so what is it that I can bring now so that I can be at my best, so that in the longer term, things can be more in line with those things that I would like to have. So capable of ensuring action in the moment of choice includes contexts, it includes the various resources that we need to help a client to remember in the moment of choice. And perhaps the most important of all of these is impact, which is helping the client to remember what is the meaning behind the changes that the client would like to make, the improvement goals that they would like to set. What is it about these goals that is meaningful? The simplest question in coaching that points to this is, and when you're able to do this, what will you get from it? And we keep just asking that question until the client actually then says, well, I don't know. I don't know why this is important to me. It just is. And that's when you know that you've kind of got them. You've got it. You've got to a core value, but they don't quite know what it is. And we help them to clarify that. And it's so important because in the moment of choice, a lot of stuff appears to be important that is actually less important than progressing the goal. So we need to help a client to be able to remember what is the impact of moving towards their goals. And inside that, very importantly, what is it that they might need to let go of in order that they can move in the direction of their goals and their values? And this is a very, very key one that needs to be rehearsed again and again and again, because stuff gets in the way of movement towards our goals. And quite often it's not been properly rehearsed, and it's often emotions. I'm going to feel like this when that happens. Okay, we need to understand what that's about. and help the client to see that the emotion that is running is possibly being driven by internal fake news so that they can move past it. Okay, so that's what we mean by a well-formed goal, which is part of cognitive balance. All right, so I'm going to pause now, and I'm going to get Lisa to come in, and then I'm going to deal with some Q&A.
Wonderful.
And then if there's anybody here after that, we'll move on into cognitive balance.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Tony. I was worried that we would just let you talk because I know how passionate you are about this topic. So wonderful that you managed to bring our attention back to the time and the fact that we have 10 minutes left. So Tony, yes, wonderful. I will just be concluding here. So to all participants, if you have questions, remarks, something you'd like us to address during this webinar, please feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens, and we'll make sure that Tony answers them before the end of this webinar. So I hope you enjoyed this webinar and found this vast content, at least a part of the vast content, both insightful and inspiring. And we'd love to talk to you. So whether you want to be coached, you want to become a coach, or you want to develop your organization, contact us and let's have a chat, and we'll see how we can support you and how we can bring more coaching into this world.
All right, so we're going to just move on. So we spoke about cognitive balance just now, and cognitive balance really is this business of really having a clear and present understanding of our goals, and the reason why we have these goals, our values, and the things that are meaningful to us. But for many of us, even though we may know that, we might still go off track. So why is that? Why might we go off track even though we might have this issue? All right. So I'm going to skip this slide. And I'm going to just quickly talk about the meaning-making system and how that impacts on us. And I touched upon it during the Q&A, but the mind has this ongoing process, which is known as the salience network, which is going on all the time. And the salience network really is a process by which we make meaning from the information that is coming to us in a particular moment. And it is the process by which the mind decides, unfortunately, most of the time for us, not giving us a conscious choice. The mind makes a decision on what we should be attending to in a particular moment. And then what we should do with that attention. I also creates the coping strategies to the agitations that we may feel relative to what meaning we make out of a particular situation. And we say that attention can be either skillful or unskillful. So skillful really means that it is attention that we know about. So I'm paying attention to this and I know it, rather than just being caught up in the flow of thinking. Unskillful attention is just being caught in the flow or perhaps being just on the autopilot and not being aware of what it is that we're paying attention to and whether it's the most important thing for us in a particular moment. And sadly, this is the default state. Depending on who you read, neuroscientists say that 95 to 99.9% of everything we think, feel, and do is totally automatic. And that's not really particularly useful to us. So what is the nature of the stuff that might take us off track? And I'll just quickly run through this very quickly. I mentioned it earlier on that the subconscious mind is continuously using often reconstructed or patchy stories from our past in order to make predictions about how the present is going to impact on our future. And this creates and generates for us a lot of what are often negative emotions, which are fundamentally designed to keep us alive. We use these emotions to protect our egos today. But the emotions were actually designed by evolution to protect our bodies, but that's not how we're using them. And so we say that in other words, our minds are very, very good at creating this thing called fear, which is false evidence appearing real. And sometimes I like to call this fake news. So I'm in the process of writing a paper which will be published very, very soon on this, and it's entitled "Fake News Starts in Here." It's not necessarily out there. So cognitive balance is being able to stay on track by seeing things as they actually are, rather than being attentive to the fake news, being attentive to the real news rather than the fake news. Okay, so how do they work, these fears? So by default, the default mind believes that because something happened on the outside, therefore consequences in terms of our behavior will happen. So in other words, there are events that occur on the outside which we call activating events. And that's something that happens out there. And an example of an activating event might be that I'm being thrown into an important meeting and I'm being asked to contribute. So an activating event is something that creates an emotional experience that might take us off track for us. That's why we call it activating, because it's activating an emotional response. Okay, there's an activating event. And what we tend to believe, most of us, is that that activating event leads directly to the consequence. So something happens out there, so therefore I did this. So in other words, because, or using that example, because I'm just trying to, sorry, I've advanced the slide. I'm just trying to remove the participant window so that I can read what I wrote here on this slide. But fundamentally, it's because I can't read it, but it's because I'm in an important meeting and being expected to contribute. Therefore, I'm creating an emotion about feeling anxious and unsafe. And I'm creating a behavioral consequence, which is perhaps not speaking up when even though perhaps my opinion might be valuable. So activating event leading directly to consequence is what we tend to believe. The thing is, though, it's never true. What actually happens is that the activating event on the outside interacts with a set of beliefs or stories or assumptions or predictions or assertions or inferences about the event and about what might happen because of the event, and then that leads to the consequences. All right. So we know that we can't often do much about stuff that happens out there. We can't change the external events, but if we change the limiting beliefs, as we have done there, we've made them go green. Then maybe we'll change the consequences. So we can change the limiting belief because the consequences actually come from the beliefs, not from the event itself. Now we know this, and I've got a story to show this, which is actually quite interesting. I've got a very, very good friend. He has two identical twins. They were both about 8 years old. He took them out to a beach in Australia, Bondi Beach. I was there with him, and both of these two 8-year-old kids went out, and they both got picked up by a rather large wave and dumped back onto the shore. So you've got identical twins. They've got the same biology. They've got fundamentally the same environment, and also in terms of their upbringing. And they both got dumped onto the beach, but their reaction was completely different. One kid was wailing and running back to his mum and hiding under her skirt and basically asking mum to take him home. And the other identical twin was, well, yippee, I'm going to do that again. And he went straight back out there. So same activating event, different consequence because of different belief systems in terms of how he was making meaning from that. So how this works in practice with that particular story might be something like that in a little bit more detail. I'm in an important meeting and I'm being expected to contribute. Leads to the belief that if I speak up, I might look stupid. So we call that an inference. And so here is a core belief. I must never look stupid because looking stupid is dangerous, because, another belief, because if I look stupid even once, then people will think that I am existentially stupid, which of course is unlikely to be true. And then if they think I'm stupid, then I will obviously lose my job. So this is jumping to conclusions. And if I lose my job, then my family are going to leave me, which is another unlikely conclusion. And therefore I'm going to die alone and poor. And it's that downward ladder of inference, which we call a dreaded outcome, that we need to help a person to see, because it is that which is blocking their ability to show up skillfully in that meeting and contribute when they have something to say. All right, so that's just an example. So that actually is all I'm going to talk about. I mean, there's a lot to say on cognitive balance, and lots of models and lots of tools. This is the whole business of helping people to challenge their narrative. And we do a little bit of narrative coaching here. Of course, mindfulness is very, very instrumental here, as are what we call 3 types of journaling, which is known as a self-reflection journal, a self-observation journal, and a self-remembering journal, together with helping people with what we call behavioral activation practices. So that's kind of how we do it. It's a lot of different ways. Can't even begin to even touch upon them here tonight. If you want to know, you have to come and join us. Okay.